Welcome back, and thank you for joining us, Shark's Perspective, the podcast with subject matter experts in marketing. You know, it's an age-old question for the modern digital age, but does your online reputation matter? For a brand, those nasty social posts are annoying, but surely those internet trolls and keyboard warriors aren't affecting your bottom line, right? Whether you're a marketer, CEO, or anyone working with any type of brand, you should be taking a listen to what your customers are saying, and not just in a structured environment, but rather in the wild where you cannot control the questions to their responses. Joe Fuca is the CEO of Reputation.com and a subject matter expert in online reputation management. And on this episode, we'll discuss the importance of ORM, best practices in customer response, your localized efforts, and strategies for publishing and listening. So let's tune in to a Reputation CEO with a reputable shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Joe, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. Please tell us a little bit about your background and story thus far, and what brought you to being the successful CEO at Reputation.com.
Hey, Kenneth. Good morning, and thanks for having me on your show. So I'm really excited about being on the show today and just kind of giving you a brief overview of my own career, just in terms of how I got to the position at Reputation.com. I've spent a lot of time, really 30 years. It's a little scary when you think about the number of years you're in an industry, because then you just show your age. But really, when you look at the 30-year career over some highlighted events in terms of companies that I've been with, it's really all been centered around how do we create value for our customers. Mm-hmm. And so whether I was at PeopleSoft in my early career trying to help, create value around human capital systems, or at McAfee when we were trying to, help secure the world in terms of our customers and making sure we provided value to keep them safe. Or at DocuSign, where I was one of the early executives there in 2011 that built the infrastructure for what we called back then digital transaction management. But we basically built the infrastructure for e-signature and really completing applications and transactions for our customers, which in a secure way was really important. And that product has obviously become a verb, and the ability to actually take action to complete a transaction without using fax machines and scanning paper. And then that kind of fast forwarded into the world of Reputation.com. I had a conversation with the founder about 8 years ago, and I always kind of kept an eye on it. And, I think Kenneth, as we look in the industry today, companies care about feedback. And I think 5 years ago, it was becoming popular, but now it's become part of the mainstream. So, leading a company like Reputation.com is just like right in the wheelhouse in terms of, bringing that kind of value to our customers. And I'm super excited to take on the role.
Well, so from a CEO's perspective, and not necessarily from being the CEO of Reputation.com, but, you also hear from a lot of other CEOs. How do you think reputation affects a brand from that perspective, a CEO? You say that they all are listening, but I know that there are some that don't listen enough. I think those are generally the ones that end up maybe out of work at some point, but it's such a prevalence in our life today. Where do you sort of see that from a CEO's perspective?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think if you look at it from a CEO's perspective, it's almost like just the whole concept of listening to your customer base. And if you don't listen to your customer base, you could end up in a situation like our friends at Sears or our friends at Toys R Us. And it's interesting. If you look, the company actually produced a report today just about the reputation score around certain retailers. And if you think about it, like most CEOs just looking at the quality of what the customer's thinking, think about just your retail experience, right? And you always get the same brands that pop up to the top, your Nordstrom's, right? You always get these, and their brands, although Apple's struggling a little bit sometimes just because Their brand is great, but the people are actually getting a little frustrated with the waiting in line, the scheduling appointments to get their things fixed. And you just brought up a great example, right? Like, it's like if the CEO of Apple is not really looking at their reputation in an unstructured way, then he might be listening to the false news, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what do I mean by that? I think over time, a structured feedback from your customer has always been surveys, quiet, easy feedback to the customer once they leave the store or what have you. Unstructured feedback is literally the world of Google, Facebook, and all the ways that the common consumer can give feedback to brands. And boy, if that CEO is not listening, then he might not know he has a real problem with parking. And he might not know that people are really starting kind of a negative influence or sentiment about his brand. And that's pretty important.
Agreed. Well, I think a lot of what we've also seen, and you're starting to hear more speakers. I know that a lot of the conferences like Consumer Affairs will speak about this, but reputation can affect the brand perception as well, and how that leads to sales and leads, because you see often where people cite online or through some social post that they're seeing all these negative reviews and they were thinking about signing up for this, to buy this product or sign up for this service. How have you started to see that conversation evolve as well, and how it really can affect sales?
Yeah. So I think so what we've tried to do, putting the reputation.com hat on for a second, we try to look at real sales impact of people's sentiment towards a company. And so what we try to say is, all right, look, if customers have, if the combination between the reviews, the sentiment, the social feedback, the messaging services that are available today can give us, some type of comfort that our customers can be found easily and easily communicated with, we've actually started to put together some pretty solid ROI calculations around that. One of our customers, Ford, did a study, and we were able to correlate actual sales per dealership based on their actual reputation score. So when you think about reputation score, just think of something that aggregates all that data out there between you and your customer.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have a dealer who has a better reputation score, then we've been able to tie back an extra 2% of sales at that dealer per year. And so then you start to, really get back into what that math looks like, and it can be significant. So we're trying to do the same thing in healthcare. We have, the interesting thing, Kenneth, is that healthcare has really changed over the last several years, and we have over half the healthcare systems in our reputation management platform, and the data coming back there is really exciting, because I think doctors and healthcare systems for the first time are really caring about what you and I think of the service, whether it's the cleanliness of the facility or whether it's the actual doctor's bedside manner. And I can tell you, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I don't know about you, but it just didn't seem like it was a big, it didn't seem like anybody cared. It was like if the doctor was good, that's all you cared about. But now it's really become a big deal. And back to the whole point of drawing it back to sales, I mean, we've got some healthcare institutions like Ascension Healthcare with, 7,000 doctors that are really starting to point back to more revenue per bed, the higher the reputation score of that hospital system. So anyways, those are kind of a couple examples where we're really trying to drive into, what does reputation and brand mean to actual sales performance.
Well, maybe if they would just pay attention to how long I had to wait out in the front lobby until I got to the second into the room where I had to wait another hour, maybe we could just post a negative review on Yelp, and that get me seen quicker. I'd love to know if my doctor actually was paying attention to that. But so where are you starting to see a convergence with some of the agencies that help support these efforts? You're starting to see the agencies that support social, especially where people put comments on Facebook and the other channels, are also involved. Are you seeing any kind of, you know, buy-in or better performance with the agencies with the brands? Are they starting to get into that conversation now? Because I know that's a struggle for a lot of agencies to really understand online reputation management, or maybe not understand it, but how to interact better with the brand to help support those efforts.
Yeah, I think they're coming along. So in most of our largest customers, they all have agencies that support them,
Yeah.
right? And then they all have sort of this like social listening capability. And I think along with the maturity of the reputation market in terms of people understanding how important it is, you're starting to see agencies now actually co-sell and resell with companies like Reputation.com, where they're saying, all right, well, it's one thing for us to build the brand and build the content for social and to be able to be seen and searched on in an easy way. It's another to actually partner with some platforms where we can actually help you manage that, Mr. Customer.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm starting to see it. I'm seeing agencies that represent some of our biggest customers like GM and Ford step up. I'm seeing a lot of local regional agencies provide support for some of the local hospitals with our platform.
Mm-hmm.
I think agencies are actually starting to really use it as the forefront now of gaining traction and strategic worth to some of their customers. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a great question because it's actually an area that I'm looking at as a business and thinking, okay, I need to probably have a regional kind of partnership approach with agencies. So not only we can teach them the platform, but we also teach them about trends that we're seeing in that industry for that agency.
Exactly, and it's a totally different spectrum. But I mean, you sort of think of data, and data itself is hard for a lot of agencies to really understand. Well, they get the concept of it, but knowing how to use it the way a data agency would, it's the same sort of thing with brand reputation. I mean, they get that because they support the brand, but somehow how it ends up impacting the direct sales, only the brand sometimes understands. So it's obviously a struggle just trying to help educate all the different parties to get up to speed and all the things that keep emerging with trends. But you talked a little bit about Ford and GM and some of the hospitals are doing well. Are you particularly seeing any verticals that are either generally really succeeding or really struggling with dealing with their reputation scores? I mean, I'm assuming restaurants in general, sink or swim off of good reviews, but are there other examples where you see that really stand out to you?
Yeah, so I think if you, the ones that surprised me the most were things like property management.
Hmm.
And I was like, what?
Yeah,
And then
no
I started
kidding.
thinking about what property managers do. And just think about it. Like, one of our largest customers, Graystar, is probably the largest property management firm
Sure.
in North America. And they use the platform in order to understand, each property manager has a set of properties, and if they've got negative feedback or negative sentiment on the way they manage their properties, just think back, either yourself or when your kids are, rented a place or were looking at a place, it wasn't real easy for them to look up for reviews on whether that place was either clean, had good neighbors, or the property manager wasn't the most easiest person to work with. How's that for being polite?
Exactly.
And now they actually track it. They group it. They can see which properties are doing better based on the reviews. One of the things that you asked me, Kenneth, is interesting. You brought up Yelp a few times. It's interesting. Like, Yelp is actually lost its way outside of restaurants. And so if you think about restaurants
Could
and like
not agree
single
more.
house, yeah, it's just kind of lost its way. And so what's interesting is that the common consumer now is actually using Google and Facebook. And just to give you some stats, relative to auto industry, 80% of all searches and reviews and review gathering is all done on Google and Facebook now. So
Mm-hmm.
Yelp has dropped to 5%. Now, I didn't realize it was that dramatic. In the healthcare industry, in certain states in the like California, Yelp is still holding a 20% market share, but 80% of even healthcare is coming through Google and Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
So the search engines are really becoming this sort of forefront of feedback, and I think that's why industries like property management are popping up in a big way. You'll see hospitality start to come down this path pretty hard because people are starting to really give really good feedback. But yeah, so property management's a good one. Here's another fun one for you. How about Westfield's malls?
Wow.
How about the concept of? I know that's what I said. Is like, so what are you guys using it for? And there's like their big feedback was, well, we actually want to know the review and sentiment power of the brands in our malls, because we actually don't want to have leaseors or brands in our malls that have really bad reviews. And I didn't even think about
Absolutely. Great point.
right? Like the mission of a mall is to have happy customers, people that want to go there, classic brick and mortar, but they also want to have retailers that are actually have really good reviews. So I sat down with the chief digital officer of Westfield the other day, and he was walking me through one of his biggest problems. I was like, well, what is it? And he, believe it or not, it's parking, right? And so, like, you and I were joking about it a little earlier, but like he can really zero in on the number of negative reviews about parking, and he's figured out that one of his malls in a certain location in New Mexico has just rotten reviews relative to parking, and so he could maybe actually even take that feedback and actually start to take action on it, right, and look for ways he can improve whatever that particular brand is struggling with inside of his mall. So love some of these new industries that are looking at it.
No kidding. Well, and to your point earlier, I sort of think of Google as a company's business card, and Facebook where they're coming together to talk about your business card. So it doesn't surprise me at all about the stats you're seeing with Yelp, because I agree with you. They've lost their way in a lot of ways. So at least with analytics, you guys have a very powerful analytics dashboard. How does analytics help brands get actionable insights from looking at themselves, other than just the sentiment example you get? But are you seeing really larger data insights from the analytics that you guys can provide?
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. So what we're seeing is that because let's just say we're monitoring, several million reviews for a given customer in a year, right? There's no way a marketing team can look at that many reviews and aggregate that kind of data. So what you're seeing now in these reputation players is you're really looking at how do you use machine learning and artificial intelligence to try to set up models so that you can look at all this data in an easy way and drill into it to find actionable items. But boy, if you don't have these kind of dashboards and analytics, then you could go, a certain period of time without actually being able to know, what's really happening with you. And so some of the companies, at least some of our customers, are starting to use the reputation score as a meter for how they're doing, not only against their industry, but also against their competitors, but also even inside the company, right? So we've got one hospital system that's using the reputation score to measure the doctors are competing. And I love that. I think it's great that the doctors are even thinking about reputation score, let alone competing. And then I have another healthcare system that's paying bonuses based on reputation score. So they've basically set aside a pool of bonuses and said, okay, if our reputation score increases by 1% over a certain period of time, then we'll actually pay bonuses on that. So,
and that's something I'm starting to see. That's something I'm starting to see a lot more with brands I've worked with. In the contacts I've got and where I'm picking up listing is how people are tying it to bonuses for managers, and thank God they're doing it and actually, tying $1 to listening to customers.
Yeah, it's really important.
Are there any trends that you're sort of seeing in reputation today. I mean, if you look at the number of sites that have evolved, I mean, it used to be, you mentioned Yelp. There's other good, ones, Google being your business card with how that affects your map pack listings with a number of reviews and such. You've got, and other things that go into local, of course. You got consumer affairs. You got 250 plus channels, and then on top of that, you see that convergence with social, with Facebook and Instagram, and how people write reviews on Facebook all day long and get together and vent on Twitter and everything else. So are you seeing any other trends other than that, just sort of pulling all that into that sort of social proofing?
Yeah, I think there's all kinds of trends where I think we have integrations to like 160 companies that have reviews, right? So, if anything, it looks like the trend is that there's a lot of different companies and sites out there that are managing, that literally have, all of these reviews on them, right? So you start to think about the types of, just in healthcare alone, there's probably, I don't know, 25 sites that just do reviews, right? So I think the trend we're seeing is that, whether it's MD.com or Doctors.com
Sure.
or Realtor.com or
There's such an
you really
interesting
start thinking
cottage
about,
industry of reviews now.
yeah, and so that's why I was just thinking about like all the different trends. There's a company called Vitals, and so you go to Vitals.com, you get doctor feedback. It's really interesting how all these different sites that we've actually integrated with, I think it's over 170. So I think that trend is, really growing. And of course, if you really want to do well, one of the biggest trends that we've seen is now that Google is sort of, I like your term about the business card. Guess what? The business card's actually more complex than you think, because what we've seen in the industry is that Google has Google My Business, which is one engine, Google Search, which is another engine, and then Google Maps, which is another engine. And so the trend right now is to not only be able to optimize being found, but then it's optimized taking action. So if I want to find a doctor near me with certain specific talents, then I have to actually optimize all three of those engines, because I might want to, set up an appointment right then and there with my phone using SMS text. And that's another trend that's happening right now. So people wanting to use, mobile device to find a doctor, get an appointment with a doctor, and then be able to use SMS text, that's becoming really popular. The whole concept of reviews by texting has become really popular. So that's something that we're seeing right now that's becoming kind of a forced trend with consumers.
So what are the sort of best practices you see with how brands, whether it be their customer care team or a social team or whatever team, or whether or not they're leveraging an agency to help support that, but how should brands interact best with customers?
Yeah. So look, we have some ways that we are explaining to people that we think is really important. We think if you're going to communicate with your customers, you should set up multiple entry points that are comfortable for that customer. So if the customer wants to Facebook Messenger you or instant, send you a text message, you should have some kind of formal way to respond to those inquiries, right? We're seeing in the auto space, the Facebook messaging thing is kind of going nuts. I don't know why, but I guess people actually send messages through Facebook, even about, making an appointment for their oil change, right? So it's really just kind of trended now that people want to be able to do things where they're the most comfortable. So look, if the age group of 35 and over is using Facebook on a daily basis and that's where they want to communicate, then these brands need to be able to be set up for that and communicate, using those vehicles, right? And then relative to, being able to queue those up and be able to respond, what we've been telling brands is, look, the more reviews that you can solicit from your customer base, the better off you are in so many ways. And when we say that, look, the more you communicate with your customer, the more you're going to know about your pluses and minuses. And what Google's proved, you know what I'm saying? And what Google's proven is that the more reviews, plus or minus, your search rankings go up. And it's all about activity and the way that they set it up. And again, back to those three different engines, you got to be optimized for all three. And all of these things are big trends in the industry.
When you look at where your own industry evolves, I mean, a lot of the reputation players like yours has a dashboard. You've integrated in a lot of the social listing type tools like you just mentioned. Do you see the industry moving more in that direction, or moving to manage reputation, or moving more towards social listening to interact with customers sort of in that like and share type engagement?
Yeah, I think both. I think if you're really thinking about online reputation, you better have social listening in your platform. The problem is some companies like us, when they think of social listening and social publishing, those are actually two different things. And
Agreed.
we did some social publishing stuff first because some of our biggest customers wanted us to. And it was like, okay, great. And so when I showed up, to run the company 5 months ago, I was like, all right, well, this is interesting that you can publish content for your customers. Mm-hmm. But we really need to be, if we're talking about reputation, I would argue publishing content is not a big portion of reputation management. I would argue that social listening and understanding how you respond to your customers' issues socially is more important for reputation. So,
agreed.
Yeah, I think like anything, you got to dive into the detail. And so, we have, and now we're really heavily focused on social listening and how do we get better at all the different platforms and meet people where they are, right? So, we'll get there. Think of it this way: some of these social products, you need to be very careful that you're not reinventing content management, which you and I have seen over the last 30 years.
Yeah.
Content management's exciting, but it's not like that's more of your agency communicating a branding message, which is interesting, but actually listening and understanding what your customers need through the social platform really becomes more of a strategic thing, whereas content management becomes more tactical.
Perfect. All right, Joe, we've come to that special point in the show. Are you ready for the 5 most important questions that you're going to be asked today?
Wow, is this like machine gun questions?
These are the questions that will make your customers evaluate whether or not to sign up with a reputation. No, I'm just kidding. But here we go. I'm asking somebody in San Francisco. San Francisco 49ers or Golden State Warriors?
Golden State Warriors.
Star Wars or Star Trek?
Oh, man, that's actually really hard for me. I love both. I'll go Star Trek.
Okay. You have really good food on the pier and on all the seafood. So here's a good one: sea bass, or my part of the country, catfish.
Sea bass.
Channels with reputation scores, search engines like Google, Yelp, and Consumer Affairs, or more social listening channels with reviews like Facebook?
Yeah, I would go with the first one, just because it has my name in it.
There you go. Good. And the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Oh, boy. I think I'll go biscuits.
Not a lot of biscuits or cornbread in the San Francisco pier with sea bass. So
no, but biscuits. What you didn't ask though is, like, you could eat cornbread that's not super hot and still enjoy it, but biscuits have to be warm.
True. Joe, then where do people find out more about you, follow you, connect? Where do you drive them to? Which website and social channel?
Well, right now, obviously, I'm the CEO of Reputation.com, so that's always interesting. We do a lot with our social site inside of LinkedIn, as well as on our Twitter page. But yeah, my Twitter handle is Fuca Force. So I guess it's the force that needs to be reckoned with.
There you go.
Maybe I should have said Star Wars, right, with the force, but
there
I
you
went
go.
Star Trek.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for joining us on A Shark's Perspective.
Yeah, no problem. Appreciate it, Kenneth, and always love giving good feedback on any particular topics.
Too. So there was my conversation with Joe Fuca, the CEO of Reputation.com and a subject matter expert in online reputation management. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from our conversation with him. First, your brand's reputation is evolving and more quickly than ever before. You can only control so much, so if you do not intently listen to your customer base, there's a very good chance that you can lose business. Structured surveys for listening are okay, but you've got to look at that with a balance, and you've got to also look at the unstructured ones. With good reasons, CEOs love Net Promoter Scores, but unstructured and often unfiltered are the Googles, Facebooks, and everywhere else where people are talking more freely about you and your brand. It's the unfocused focus group, if you will, and collectively they can shape a lot of the perception of your brand in the online world as well as influence others. And it's not just posts you have to defend. Listen, your reputation can affect your lead gen efforts, it can affect your sales, it can affect your customer retention. It's a message that I've given keynote addresses on and a message I firmly believe. There's a real sales impact based upon your customer sentiment of you. When you consider reviews and how people do research on a brand, they can find out so much more online and quickly. Reputation is a form of currency and you just don't want to go broke. Second, if you're at a brand or an agency, then you should learn the strategy. Think about the partnerships. When you're thinking about your posts, go further than engagement. For reputation, remember that social listening and social publishing are completely different. Publishing good content for engagement or even for suppression to quiet the noise is helpful. But as Joe alluded to, social listening and understanding how you respond to your customers' issues socially is more important for reputation. Set up multiple entry points for customers and then have responses ready. People want to be able to do things where they're the most comfortable, and you've got to be optimized where your customers want to communicate with you. Third, there were some great examples like auto, healthcare, and malls where research showed that search engines like Google and Facebook are responsible for 80% or more of where the common consumer is using these platforms for all searches on reviews and review gatherings. I love when he said that search engines are becoming a forefront of feedback, but there are new review sites emerging every day. You've got to take a holistic view of all of them and all of your reviews, especially if you're a business with thousands to millions of reviews. They're on sites, they're on search engines, seeing if your brand is right for their dollars and weighing this with social proofing. Quite simply, Google is your modern day business card and Facebook is where they're talking about your business. And your reviews are right there for all the world to see on those and other channels. And I'll throw in a fourth, don't hide or shy away from reputation. Be proactive. The more reviews that you can solicit from your customer base, then the better off you are. The more you communicate with your customers, then the more you're going to know about your pluses and minuses. Don't forget also that reputation has a strong impact on your local presence for a product or service near me. It will bolster your local presence. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. It's been my honor to spend this time with you in order to discuss another one of the many components that makes up marketing today. Live long and prosper and join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.